You have probably heard of all of the good habits to improve your life. Eating clean, exercising, cold exposure, meditating, going for walks in nature. But what nobody talks about are the small subconscious habits that you probably do every single day without thinking twice that seem innocent on the surface, yet they are quietly destroying your confidence, lowering your self-esteem, and even impacting your mental health. My name is Heather, and for many years I struggled with severe anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. During my teenage years, I spent 4 years living in a psychiatric hospital, and so I've experienced firsthand the impact that bad mental health can have on your life. Yet over the last 6 years, I've been on a massive healing journey to rebuild my confidence, overcome my low self-esteem, and I've managed to completely change my life. And so in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the 3 subconscious habits that might be quietly impacting your mental health, so that you can spot them and take your power back. The first subconscious habit is choosing what's easy over what's right. I'll be honest, I think a lot of us have this idea in our heads that improving our lives is sexy and that it should feel good. We tend to fall in love with the idea of waking up early, exercising, eating healthy foods, quitting social media, improving our confidence, learning new things. But when the moment actually comes to get up early and go do a workout or sit down and focus and study, we feel all of this resistance. And I think a big reason that we fall for this illusion is because social media makes self-growth or self-improvement look aesthetically pleasing or enjoyable. You know, we look at people online who are working out with their aesthetic bodies, or they're posting these delicious foods, or they're working on their goals, but we often forget that this is just a tiny edited part of the story. The truth is, real improvement is often messy, uncomfortable, and invisible. For example, when I look back at my own life, the moments that changed it were never glamorous or enjoyable. To share with you a personal story, back in 2019, I had severe social anxiety and I honestly hated speaking to people. However, there came a point where I knew I needed to go out and get a job because I couldn't just stay in my room scrolling on TikTok forever. And so one day I went out into a small town nearby, planning to hand out my CVs to just like local shops, pubs, and restaurants. And I remember literally feeling physically sick in my stomach with the thought of having to speak to somebody. And so before I went into each shop, it literally took me 10 minutes to hype myself up, and I was just pacing outside and repeating in my head, Heather, just do it. Just go and do it. Just go in. Just go in. Don't think about it. And finally, I'd muster up the courage to literally just go in there for a few minutes, hand my CV, say a couple of words, and walk back out.
Hi.
Okay.
And imagine, it took me 10 minutes for each individual shop because I was just so scared to go in, and so it took me so much time. And I remember that day so clearly because it was just so uncomfortable. But yet at the same time, I knew I had to choose what was right over what was easy, otherwise I would never start moving forward. Another example I'll share is that a few years ago I was working in a restaurant and I made quite good friends with the other staff there. But slowly over time I started to realize that their version of fun was always drinking, partying, or taking drugs, and at first I joined in because I wanted to feel accepted and I wanted to be liked. But as time went on, I noticed that every time we would hang out, I felt regret the next day because I didn't like the version of myself that it brought out. And one day it was New Year's Eve and one of my close friends invited me to a house party. She really wanted me to meet her other friends because we had become quite close. And you know, it's New Year's Eve, and so society tells you that you should be celebrating or drinking or joining in. But I had a moment of realization where I was like, I just don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to keep doing these actions that don't make me feel good or don't align with the person of who I want to become. And so I thanked her for the invite, but I politely declined, and I turned off my phone for the evening and I went to bed at like 9:30 p.m. And of course that felt uncomfortable to do in the moment because it's New Year's Eve and everyone's out, and it kind of felt isolating. And I'm pretty sure my friend thought I was a little bit weird. But I also knew deep down that that was the right choice to make in order for me to become who I wanted to be. And you know, as time went on, I ended up leaving that friendship group behind because we were just on different paths. And so the point I'm trying to make here with these stories is that we don't see any of this stuff on social media, do we? You don't see the anxiety, the fear, the uncomfortable emotions, the loneliness. You only see the success or the end results or the aesthetics, but that doesn't paint the full picture. The truth is, when you are working towards becoming a better version of yourself, it honestly rarely feels good in the moment, and it's not easy. And so here's my challenge for you. Pick one small uncomfortable thing that you can do today that will move you closer to the person you want to become. And if you can, drop a comment letting me know what it is, because I would honestly love to hear it. Remember, facing these challenges head on won't feel easy, but learning how to push through that discomfort is exactly how you step into a better version of yourself. Also, if you've been trying to build up better habits, but you keep finding yourself slipping back into your phone or scrolling on social media, well, you're not alone. This is something a lot of people are now quietly struggling with. And so if you want to learn how to cut your screen time by 50% or more in less than 30 days and reclaim 20 plus hours every week, then click the link in the video description to find out more. The second subconscious habit is choosing blame over responsibility. Look, I'm sure we can all agree that life can be pretty hard sometimes, right? The reality is, some people are dealt better cards, such as supportive families, financial stability, and different opportunities, whilst others might face poverty or trauma or circumstances beyond their control. Unfortunately, many of those situations are not your choice or your fault, but there does come a point in life when we have to make a decision. Am I going to let my external circumstances control my life? Or am I going to take responsibility and do what I can do to improve it? Am I going to let my past define my future, or am I going to take back control? Because when we constantly blame our parents or the system or our circumstances or our diagnoses or other people, we give away our power. Not because those things didn't affect us, but because blame keeps us stuck. We send the message to ourselves that this happened to me and so I can't do anything about it. Or I have this diagnosis and so this is just how my life will be. Or I wasn't given the same opportunities and so there's nothing I can do. Subconsciously, you start to see yourself as powerless, believing that you have no control over your life, when that couldn't be further from the truth. Because there is always something we can do to improve our situation. And trust me, I had to learn this lesson the hard way. I ended up leaving school when I was age 15, and so I didn't finish my education, and I went into a psychiatric hospital for 4 years of my life, battling depression and anxiety. And at age 19, when I was finally discharged, I didn't even know where to start because my life was a mess. I had no qualifications, I had lost all of my friends, and when I looked around at the people around me, they were studying, they were in relationships, they were partying or having fun, and I was just stuck in anger and resentment, constantly justifying my bad choices because of all of the things that had happened to me. Until there came a moment where I had to ask myself, what kind of life do I actually want to live? Do I want to be in the same position 5 years from now, still stuck, feeling angry and resentful? Or do I want to take back control and start building something different? I had to stop telling myself that I was powerless and face the truth, which is that every day I am making choices, and those choices are shaping my future reality. And honestly, acknowledging this was painful because it meant admitting that most of my suffering came from my own reaction to things. But it was also the most freeing realization of my life because it meant that I wasn't stuck anymore, but I was finally in control. And so instead of constantly blaming my circumstances, I began to actively improve it through things like meditation, nutrition, exercising. Instead of staying angry that I missed out on school or feeling sorry for myself, I went back to college and I got my qualifications. I studied new skills. I worked my way into different jobs. I chose responsibility over blame, and little by little, through my daily choices, my whole life started to change. Because I was no longer a victim of my circumstances, but I was finally in control of my life. And so look at your life right now and ask yourself, what is one action step I can take today that will improve my life? What is one thing you can do that is in your control? And I want to be clear, taking responsibility isn't about blaming yourself or pretending that everything is your fault, but it's about owning your daily choices so that you can take back the power to change your life. The third subconscious habit is choosing reaction over reflection. As I mentioned before, every day we are making choices, but if we never take a step back to examine those choices, We end up living on autopilot, reacting instead of learning. For example, you might snap at someone and blame them for something instead of asking yourself, why were you triggered? Or maybe you feel insecure around a certain group of people, but you never question the belief underneath it. Or you might procrastinate and call yourself lazy instead of understanding, what am I actually avoiding? Often, instead of reflecting on what a situation is trying to teach us, we tend to just react emotionally, distract ourselves, or move on. However, when the lesson isn't learned, the pattern doesn't disappear, it just repeats. To give you a personal example, something that I personally struggle with when I get really stressed is that I just want to binge on sugary foods. I want chocolates and cake and biscuits and all of the nice things. And when I sat down and reflected on this pattern and questioned why does it keep on showing up, I realized that it wasn't to do with what was happening in that moment, but it was that I kept on projecting into the future. For example, I might get an anxious thought such as, I'm not sure if I can pay my bills next month, and then I would start imagining worst case scenarios or feeling this fear inside my body, and I would put this extra pressure on myself all over something that hasn't even happened yet. And so I realized that food wasn't actually the problem, but it was the coping mechanism that I was using to soothe my anxiety in the moment. And once I reflected on that pattern, I became much better at interrupting it. When I felt stressed, instead of automatically reacting to my emotions and reaching for food, I would stop and ask myself, what is the story I'm telling myself right now? I'd pause, take a few breaths, and realize that nothing is actually wrong in this moment, but it's just my mind projecting into the future again. And so this is why I'd personally recommend finding at least 10 to 15 minutes of quiet time every day to have some honest reflection with yourself. Whether it's journaling, going for a walk without your phone, doing a meditation, or simply just sitting with your thoughts. Reflection helps you to notice your triggers, question your assumptions, and understand your emotional patterns, which will help you to respond consciously instead of reacting automatically. And so start getting into the habit of checking in with yourself and asking, what triggered me today? What could I have handled better? What am I avoiding right now? Because the moment you choose reflection over reaction, you give yourself the power to learn from the experience, and this is where real change begins. Click here to learn how I cut my screen time by 80%, and I hope this video helped you. All the best.